Chair recognizes Representative Peake to present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I bring before the House today HB 65, the Medical Cannabis Oil Expansion Bill. In my 11 years of presenting bills in this chamber, this might be the first time I've ever done this, but it might be best to start by telling you what this bill does not do. It does not allow the growing or cultivation of marijuana in Georgia. It does not change the THC limit, which is 5% in current law, an issue that even our Speaker has stated publicly we have already debated and voted on 2 years ago. It does not allow for the smoking of marijuana for medicinal purposes. What this bill does is build on a very successful law passed by this chamber, Haley's Hope Act, almost 2 years ago in setting up the low THC oil registry with the Department of Public Health. This program now has over 1,300 Georgians registered, over 300 doctors signed up, and it has not become a public health risk. It has not become a public safety issue. It has not led to DUIs for being under the influence of low THC oil. In fact, we had no opposition from law enforcement on this bill because the law in place has worked as intended, allowing Georgia citizens with debilitating illnesses who were properly registered with the state to legally possess medical cannabis oil. Now, let me be very clear. We still have a gaping hole in our current law, and that is access to the product. And that will have to be addressed one day. But today is not that day. So let me tell you briefly what the bill does. It adds 8 conditions to current law: autism, Alzheimer's, AIDS, HIV, Tourette's syndrome, epidermolysis bullosa, autoimmune disease, and peripheral neuropathy. It removes the end-stage qualification from 5 current conditions that are included in current law: cancer, ALS, MS, Parkinson's, and sickle cell disease. It removes the 1-year residency requirement. It changes the quarterly reporting requirement for physicians at their request to an annual report. It provides reciprocity with other states that have medical cannabis programs for possession of only what's allowed under Georgia law, medical cannabis oil with a cap of 5% THC. And it makes the compassionate allowance for patients in a hospice program to participate in the registry. This is an expansion of what has been so far a very successful program, allowing more hurting Georgians to potentially benefit from medical cannabis oil. This is the proper next step. Now, I must make this comment real quick. We clearly have an opioid epidemic in our state. And during testimony on this bill, we heard from Dr. David Bradford, the esteemed chair of public policy at the University of Georgia. And he presented his peer-reviewed public research paper that provided clear and compelling evidence that states that have access to medical cannabis see, 1, a decrease in the usage of opioids, resulting in significant cost savings to the state; 2, a decrease in the abuse of opioids; and 3, and most importantly, a decrease in lives lost from opioid overdoses. If we really want to deal with the opioid crisis in our state, and I know there's several bills that I support that are attempting that, then there is a proven response with clear data to this epidemic, and that is responsible medical cannabis legislation. So one final thought. This journey for all of us who were here 3 years ago started when we fell in love with a beautiful little girl named Haley. And then we got to know other families who had children that suffered from seizures. And we moved quickly to provide them options so that they would not have to become medical refugees fleeing our state. But what has happened since then is that we have found that more of our friends, our neighbors, our families, our colleagues wanted the option to make the personal choice in consultation with their physician to use medical cannabis oil to deal with their debilitating illness. In the last week alone, I've had one of our friends who roams the halls of this Capitol asked me about access to medical cannabis oil as they had recently been diagnosed with cancer. In the last week alone, I've had a former beloved Capitol staff member contact me saying they had received the grave news that they had one of the current 8 medical conditions and wanted to give medical cannabis oil a try. In the last week alone, I've had a member of this chamber who wanted medical cannabis oil for their relative who has a condition we are looking to add today. So, ladies and gentlemen, we owe the right to this option to Georgia citizens who are truly hurting. And for that reason, I humbly ask for your yes vote on HB 65. Mr. Speaker, I will yield the will unless there are some questions.
You have a couple of questions if you care to yield.
Yes, sir. I'll be more than glad to.
Chair recognizes Representative Laricki to your right for a question.
Gentleman, yield.
Yes, sir.
To my friend in the well, is it not true that I have a dear friend that has a daughter that benefits tremendously from this cannabis oil?
That is, to my knowledge, I have had contact with them, and yes.
Gentleman, further yield.
Yes, sir.
Is it not also true that I have expressed to you personally my concerns about moving forward with this very, very carefully and taking the extreme caution as it relates to law and moving forward with use?
You have expressed that concern, yes, sir.
I appreciate your hard work on this, and I am proud to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir.
Chair recognizes Representative Gravely to your right for a question.
This gentleman yield.
Yes, sir.
Is it not true that throughout the committee process, not only did we hear from parents and patients, but that we heard from a hospice Dr. Chata, Dr. Thrower from Emory, Dr. Wade, a pediatrician treating her own son with autism, and Dr. Whitmore from Emory Pediatrics, giving expert medical testimony about the results their patients were experiencing from the use of medical cannabis. Is that not true?
That is correct, Representative Gravely. Thank you for bringing up that point.
Does the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
When you're talking about end stage, did some of these doctors not also say that it would be against their medical ethics to not treat a patient they knew would benefit from a medicine before it got the diagnosis they were treating, before it got to an end stage diagnosis?
Yes, Representative Gravely, that is correct, and that is why removing that end stage qualifier was such a key component of this bill. That is correct. Yes, sir.
I appreciate your work on this bill. I look forward to voting for it.
Thank you.
Do you further yield?
Yes, sir. I'll take one more question, ma'am.
Chair recognizes Representative Vernon Jones to your left for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Isn't it true that we've been able to provide responsible legislation on cannabis for medical use in Georgia?
That is correct, Representative Jones.
And there has been no side effects or any negative impacts as a result of it?
The only effects have been positive to this state. That's correct.
Would the gentleman further yield?
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true, though, even at this point when this passed, and I hope it does pass, and I am in support of it, that it's still illegal to dispense it for medical purposes here in the state of Georgia?
That is correct. That is current law.
And when the gentleman yield one final time.
Yes, sir.
Isn't it true, just as this legislature, with your leadership and others, how we were able to pass responsible legislation on providing cannabis for medical purpose, that this same body can come back with that same energy and need to address this issue so people and families in Georgia can get access through dispensing, that this same body can come back with the same type of responsible legislation?
Representative Jones, I hope that's the case. We're, in the meantime, we can hope that maybe there will be some action at the federal level. But in the meantime, it is our responsibility, yes, as state legislators, to provide an option for our citizens. Yes, that is correct.
Thank you very much for all your hard
Yes,
work,
sir.
sir.
Mr. Speaker, I'll yield to well. I would ask that you vote in the affirmative, yes vote for HB 65 for the goodwill of our citizens of our state. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield the will.
Is there any objection to the previous question being ordered on House Bill 65? The chair hears none. The previous question is ordered. Is there any objection to adopting the committee substitute? The chair hears none. The committee substitute is adopted. Is there any objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of the bill. The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of House Bill 65 will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no, and the clerk will unlock the machines. Have all members voted? Have all members voted? If so, the clerk will lock the machine on the passage of House Bill 65. The ayes are 156, the nays are 6. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed.